Two Chaps, Many Cultures, episode 68. And I might step on your toes. Maybe Brett will. In either case, it will be unpleasant for Brett, myself, and you. It will be a faux pas. Let's see how we can save face. Welcome, everybody.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did I catch you in a bad moment? I'm sorry. Didn't mean
Yes,
to.
I'm very embarrassed. How can I make it up to you?
Oh no, that's all right. I felt like I infringed on your personal drink time, so I'm very sorry. And I know that you don't work here; you're simply a consultant. That's yeah. So I better not bother you with any professional questions.
Work? I mean, work?
By the way, if you're watching this, as you're watching this, whether it's live right now or maybe in 3 minutes as you hop on late and hit the replay button, don't forget, put it in the chat box. No matter on what medium you're watching it, does not matter. Put it in there and say, "Happy birthday, Brett." Happy birthday, Brett. Happy birthday, mate.
Thank you very much, sir. Appreciate it. It's been a wonderful day here at
You look much older.
Two Chaps Tower. Well, you know, it's just yeah. At least see this platform actually just shows you how you are. You know, Zoom has that wonderful ability to be able to clean up your I don't know, well, how do they put it in the app? It makes you look better. But this
really
doesn't.
Does? I haven't found that button yet, or maybe it just doesn't work on me.
Oh, well, maybe you just don't need it. You know. It's like,
yeah. Happy birthday, mate! I'm happy to see you. And for those of you who are in the cross-cultural world like we are, you might just be hopping over here because you finished day one of the 𝙈 USA conference. And this guy over this guy over here makes sure that the trains run on time in that conference.
Yeah, see, this is how you run a conference with 150 people. You just
does it matter which books you put the camera on?
Well, it does. It's actually, this is very important, and actually this book is very important. This is from our friend, the Raising Multicultural Children, Brett Parry. And these are the books that I'm still yet to give away to our friends.
So people, once you notice that the camera angle for Brett's broadcast is changing, that means the books are gone. All right.
No, absolutely. Anyway, we digress. What are we going to talk about today?
We wanted to talk about how we fix it when we make a mistake, faux pas, a gaffe, a blunder, a misstep, when we screw up.
When we look like this, right?
Yeah.
At least we feel like this.
Well, I never felt like this. Maybe you did, because I never had a briefcase like this. Well, the machete maybe, but that briefcase, you're a child of the 80s, right? I can tell. All right. So,
yeah. This is pretty good. Machete in a briefcase. Don't you do that all the time?
Yeah, once in a while. Now,
that's not a knife. I had to get that in. I had to get that in. Sorry.
That's not a knife.
It's not a knife.
Oh, show me your knife. All right. So, how many mistakes, how many faux pas have you committed? Can you remember?
No.
No. Do you want to remember?
No. Well, some of them I don't mind remembering, but some of them I don't. Yeah.
So, would you consider yourself to be fairly culturally educated?
Well, sometimes at the very worst time, I do get overconfident, maybe.
All right. So would it be safe to say, and this is where I wanted to tee you up for, is even though you might think of yourself as, oh, I'm culturally savvy enough. I've been abroad. I've traveled here. I've done business there. And I should be able to handle myself well without making a fool of myself. So is it possible that despite all our confidence, overconfidence, correct assessment of our abilities, that we still step on people's toes? Is that possible?
Absolutely.
I would think very much so.
In fact, many times there are a lot of our clients. You obviously have these clients that say, and we ask them at the start of a session, what do you want to learn? What do you want to get out of this session? And a lot of the times it's a kind of a half sarcastic, well, I want you to show me how I can't screw up. And at that point, I usually shut my computer and go, well, I'm not your guy. You are going to screw up, and you are going to be embarrassed, and you better get comfortable with it. You better be ready for it, and to the degree that you do it, either be ready to apologize and make up for it, or maybe it's not as big a deal as you think it is, and that's the thing.
I think the first step, because we announced, or I announced this for today's episode, we're going to share a few tips on how to overcome the obstacle of a cross-cultural blunder. First of all, it may be a sign that if you're struggling with this, it may be a sign that you suffer from the same syndrome that I have worked hard to heal from. I'm not quite done yet. I would say I'm a recovering perfectionist. So you might have that little chip on your shoulder telling, yeah, I need to be perfect because I am culture savvy. I can do this. There is no such thing as perfection. Give it up, people. You won't ever be perfect. And the concept of perfection is a bit flawed because it assumes that there is a super platinum diamond standard of human existence that we are supposed to reach. We should reach that kind of Mount Everest peak of human perfection. And you will recognize, should you ever get to that peak, you will be there and recognize, wait a second, there's still ways to get better, right? So there is never an end to self-improvement or to work on yourself. It's in our work, we call it striving for excellence rather than shooting for perfection, because you'll be disappointed first and foremost in yourself, and then also in others who you have the expectation for them to be as perfect as you are, and neither one of you will meet your own expectations. I like what Antimo says here. He says, we are all perfectly imperfect. I couldn't agree more.
That's right.
Certamente, Antimo. Or something like that. I hope
I think striving for perfection often throws sand in the gears of progress, because if you're, and this is, we would start a conversation with a client and say, let's identify maybe some of the differences you're going to have and where you possibly have the potential of embarrassing yourself and putting yourself in a situation where you might feel that you've kind of breached a protocol here or there, but not to overthink that. Not usually if you're overthinking it and looking for perfection, then that's sometimes an excuse not to take action or not to move forward, not to develop and learn and be the leader that you're being asked to be in the other culture. So a lot of cultures, and of course many of them, I guess more expat, the places that have received many people as foreign leaders and foreign workers, are used to foreigners anyway. They're used to people coming in, they're used to working with them, and they allow their own faux pas, right? And so I think that if you overthink it, while if you're cognizant of the potential of the differences and how to bridge them, but don't overthink it and consider that it's always going to be a negative, then that allows you to kind of have a good balance. So that
and I think as entrance into a new environment, as outsiders coming into a new group, or new to us group, we often are credited with a little bit of a goodwill in our account for how much we can screw up and how many faux pas we can commit. There's almost this unspoken expectation that the foreigner will behave like the bull in the what's that? That's the elephant.
In the china shop.
Bull in the candy shop. That's what it is. So there might be the expectation, or there might be people won't be necessarily shocked if you don't hit a bullseye every time, right? You might be off the mark a little bit, and that's perfectly okay. And this is a good learning experience because it will I'm not sure if it's going to heal you, but it will remind you that you can stop obsessing about your perceived perfection. You stop obsessing about how well you perform in that other environment, and be vulnerable enough to admit that you didn't hit the bullseye, that you were off the mark a little bit. You still hit the target. Maybe you barely missed it. Doesn't matter. At least you took a shot, right? So
Right.
who was it? Wayne Gretzky. You're going to miss every shot you don't take. So at least you take a shot, and maybe you miss it. Maybe you hit the target. Maybe you shoot a bullseye. It doesn't really matter. At least you did it. And if you're off a little, and you can admit that, I guess I didn't do this perfectly well, and I'm still learning, and can you show me how to do it better? That will endear you to those who you are trying to engage with, because they see the human being in you, not the foreign robotic entrant who is trying to be perfect, right?
So I'm going to ask you a question, because related to that, if the culture that you are from, and in Germany, do we often not say to people that you have to come with a lot of data and information and to build your credibility? So if you make a mistake in those contexts, how much is it easier to, or is it harder to come down from a mistake in that culture than it is perhaps to go to a culture that maybe like an Asian culture, where they appreciate that humility? But is that humility in your culture seen as sometimes, and I don't, I'm asking the question intentionally, because this is my question is, if I am humble in that and I'm not showing that I've got all my ducks in a row, then does that do more damage to me in that culture than it might do being a humble, say, in my country or China or something like that?
That's a good question, and I would say no, because I think at that moment when you recognize that you don't have your ducks in a row, you have two options. You can try to gloss over the fact, or you can own up to it. And in my culture, glossing over it or trying to pull wool over the eyes of your audience, that'll hurt you even more than owning up to your mistake. So there's such a thing as an honest mistake, right? You can say that, man, I wish I was better. I wasn't right now, so this is what happened. I own it. That's taking responsibility for one's own actions, right? To duck out and maybe point blame, or find excuses or justifications, that will hurt your credibility even more. So in my experience, even though there are several cultures, including my native culture, that may not have the big antennas out for vulnerability, where if you're trying to cover up a mistake, or ignore it, or just leave it sitting there in the room for everybody to stare at, is going to hurt you even more. So better to address it, better to move forward. And I mean, in German culture, I think the one example that would tell that story is Germany as a society, as a culture, has this one big mistake, dare I say it, that is lingering like a dark cloud over our heads. What happened in the 1930s and 40s, and Germany did not shy away from that. The exact opposite. We're forcing each other, we're forcing ourselves to look at it and say, okay, this is what happened. This is what our great grandparents or grandparents' generation has screwed up royally, and let's face the demon. Let's look at the mistake, and let's learn from it, let's be better, and let's try to make amends as much as possible. So that I think that in at least in my culture, it would be very good for you, no matter how grave your mistake, or if it's just a momentary lapse of reason. If you own up to it, it'll help you with your credibility and with your acceptance.
I think in most cultures that's the case to varying degrees, but I think it's a great insight to say that just like everywhere, a bit of humility and a bit of acceptance that there is a mistake, there has been a mistake being made, that you're willing to look at it and perhaps use the judgment and the learning from others to guide you in the right way. I mean, that to most cultures, I think people would appreciate that. So that probably is general everywhere we go. But it is the learning. This is what preparing for it so that you can maybe negate the possibility of it happening. Takes curiosity, takes learning, takes intentional education to say, you know, how can I actually say build a good set of culturally competent skills to be able to go in and in the main be very, very good in terms of working across cultures. And then again, when you make a mistake, you're even at more of a chance of being forgiven that mistake, because you've actually, you know, as we say, as we know in Asian cultures like China especially, the mianzi, the face, the giving face, obviously builds. It's like a bank account. So the more you put in the bank by doing the right thing, and most of the time, the far more of the chances are that you're going to be just given that sense of grace when you do make a mistake.
That is a concept that I learned from an Indian businessman here in the United States. He's from Gujarat, in fact, and he phrased it in a way that I'll never forget. He said, "You got to make deposits into people's goodwill accounts, and as you keep making those deposits in people's goodwill accounts, at some points later in that relationship, you might be able to make withdrawals because you'll have to, because you'll make a mistake, or you will need their goodwill in order to compensate for something that didn't go well." So paying it forward, so to say, in terms of good behavior, in terms of culturally savvy, adjusted behavior. Now, that's easier said than done. And to your point, Brett, it takes a couple of preparational and guiding instruments. Study up, learn about that culture with which you are planning to interact successfully. Expose yourself to cultural training. Now, that is something that can happen before or during and after your assignments start. So I would always advise, yes, training, great. Topical application of knowledge, great. Now, make sure you have a sounding board. Make sure you have a coach. That could be somebody that is formally a culture coach, a person like Brett or myself. That could be a peer in your organization at the destination culture at which you're doing your work, or within the room in which you interact. Find somebody who is more in tune to the unspoken rules of behavior in your target culture than you are. So that coach, that person that can be your sounding board, the person that gives you feedback, usually afterwards, telling you, okay, here's what you did well, this is what we can improve a little bit on, or here's where you maybe screwed up, and this is exactly what you did to screw up. So let's keep in mind next time, this is how you might be able to change your behavior or adjust your behavior. Yeah. So that's why coaching is relevant. That's why we work with our clients, because they need to be successful. They will have a deposit made in people's goodwill accounts, and they want to make sure that the balance stays positive. We help you make those deposits.
Yeah. And Sue says here, this is obviously referring to the US culture, but not sure we make amends here in the US, like just to move on. So there is that sense that a culture that has a very forward thinking and maybe shorter term cultural reference, it makes it harder to do what happened in Germany. It's harder to reflect and face some of the historical faux pas that have taken place. And therefore, it's actually usually celebrated that you make a mistake, but you move on very quickly, and people are going to allow you to do that. And so does, you know, that maybe brings in another set of challenges for an individual, and in this case, as Sue's talking about, a country, right, as big as a country, to not realize when you're in the middle of making that mistake and sometimes doubling down on it, right? Doubling down.
I agree. I agree on the bigger scheme of wrongdoing and owning up to mistakes. However, I think there's two ways or two directions from which to look at this. One would be to say, I am sorry, and the other direction is to ask for forgiveness. So I am sorry is something that I can express my regret over something I did, and that could be a throwaway line. This could just be me getting it off my chest and feeling that by saying that I'm sorry, I'm absolved of my quote unquote sin. I don't think that's quite how it works. It requires the other side of your mistake to say, okay, I see that this was not in with bad intentions, and you wanted to do better, and this went wrong. Let's forget about it. We're good, right? So it always takes two sides, and this saying I'm sorry is important. I think this is a critical phrase actually to learn in any foreign language that you're entering, right? If you're going to Vietnam, it would be nice to know how to say I'm sorry in Vietnamese. However, simply being sorry is not really remorseful. You need to be able to show through your behavior that you want to learn from your mistake. And that's how we build this episode. How do you recover from the faux pas? Recovering is not by saying, I'm sorry. Recovering is by showing that you want to do it better next time.
Yeah, the sorry but, or the sorry if you were offended, you know, that kind of seems a little bit, you know, it's a disclaimer saying, well, I'm sorry, it's your fault, you know. I'm
sorry you feel that way.
Yeah, I'm sorry you feel that way.
And I feel that way about my bad behavior.
Right, as our good friend Kelly MacLeod Chingan always says, if it is perceived as the person to the other person that it is offensive, then it is offensive. That is the fact. I mean, that is, and so then you should, and she says that obviously you take the step to say, okay, be curious. Say to the person, I understand that I really may have upset you, or I have committed this faux pas. Tell me how I can do better in the first place. Even if you don't think that what you did is wrong, the way it received is the truth. The way it has been received is the truth. It's their truth, and it's just as valid as yours.
Yeah.
So we're getting into personal interactions here, but the same kind of a play, I think, applies in all interactions and all efforts we make in culture, that there are always these learning moments we sometimes miss by just saying, oh, okay, I'm sorry, let's move on, right?
and it requires some self-reflection afterwards. So don't forget to breathe. I mean, you'll be making mistakes, and you will recognize it sometimes in the moment, and you will feel, I don't know, you'll shock yourself, or you'll be paralyzed a little bit for a second there by your own failure or fault. But failure is not that. Failure is feedback. It's giving you feedback that, oops, that didn't work. So take a breath, keep your cool, trust your process. Life will continue. However, afterwards, after you've put some time between you and the event that went wrong, do some self-reflection. What is it that happened? How was what I did a mistake? Or was it? Who do I ask to find out? Talk to your coach, talk to a peer, let them help you assess how big is the damage. Is there damage at all? What can I do to repair? And what can I learn from this to adjust myself for the next time I'm confronted with a similar situation? So it's a constant reevaluation loop that you want to expose yourself.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Very good. Excellent.
And since we're on that topic, reevaluation, a constant loop, we're getting older every year. Every time we pass the sun or circle the sun, we get older. So Antimo says, happy birthday, Australian hunk and chap. He had to say that. I wonder what would have happened if he hadn't said it. So Antimo says this. Sue says, happy B-Day.
Thank you.
You have a B-Day. All right.
Yeah, it's been a wonderful day. Got lots of messages. I got a very special gift of having the family arrive back from Poland. And they came in, they unpacked, they went to bed. That's
good for them.
Good for them. Yes,
how would your best friend in Australia say it if a good buddy, a good mate in Australia would say happy birthday to another person that they have a good relationship with? How would they phrase that?
Well, I don't know. It'd be just yeah, happy birthday, you old B. You know,
okay. I almost got you to commit to that word. Almost.
Yes. Well, you know, there may be children watching, and even though it's late at night, they should be in bed, but there may be children watching. But yes, you know, it's just usually with a great deal of sarcasm, and you have to have a pretty thick skin. So that when these celebrations come around, and don't worry, I've got a few of those messages already today from across the pond. Yep,
a celebratory clinking of a glass, even though it's only water. It may look like gin and tonic, but it is water. Cheers to you, my friend. Happy birthday, Mike. And to everybody else, we're out. We'll see you again tomorrow.
Thank you very much, everybody. Have a wonderful. Put your comments and tell us, how do you recover?
Yes, please.
See you later.
Cheerio.